From the center of the universe, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, this is the SDM Show with your host, Rob Cairns. The SDM Show focuses on business, life, productivity, digital marketing, WordPress, and more. Sit back, relax, grab your favorite drink, and enjoy the show. Here is Rob.
Hey everybody, Rob Cairns here. I'm the founder, CEO, and chief creator of Amazing Ideas and Stunning Digital Marketing. In today's podcast, I sit down with my friend John Locke, and we talk all things SEO. You really want to listen to this podcast if you want to get traffic to your website. So sit down, relax, grab a drink, and enjoy the conversation that John and I had. Hey everybody, Rob Cairns here. Today I'm here with John Locke of Lockdown SEO. How are you today, John?
I'm doing well. How are you, Rob?
Not too bad. It's a pleasure to finally get you on this podcast. You know, we've had many a Twitter conversation over the years, and we've never actually spoken, so welcome.
Oh, well, thank you for having me.
My pleasure. So let's get some little bit of background, which I like to do with everybody I have on. How did you get into the SEO business, and how did that kind of transpire?
Well, before I got into the SEO business, I started doing web design. I was actually in my late 30s, and I was working at the Wonder Bread plant. I had been a member of the Bakers Union. I had managed bakeries for Safeway. I'd moved over to Wonder. I saw that whole union. The pension was getting defunded. My body was having repetitive motion injuries. And I decided that I wanted to make a career change, and I wanted to do something that I could do for, the remaining decades of my life. So I studied web design, and I started doing that full time about 9 years ago. And I did that for a while. Was building sites for local clients. I was doing a lot of subcontracting, developmental builds for larger agencies. Around 2000, late 2017, early 2018, I decided to make a shift to SEO because I had seen that is the end result of what people really want when they get a new website is more traffic. They want more revenue. They want more leads. So I had some success doing some smaller side projects with that. So I started kind of changing my positioning around that, focusing more on SEO. And very luckily, I think it was around 2018, I got one of my very first SEO clients, and they were doing, I think, high 5 figures a month. Right now, they're doing multi-million dollars per year. They were doing high 5 figures per year, I should say, and now they're doing in the millions. They referred me to a lot of people, so I got a lot of different clients like that. I also focused the content on my site more around SEO. I started doing SEO videos on YouTube. I actually got a lot of clients from different places around the country just from that. They would see some random video that was answering a question that they had. And right now I have about 10 or 12 people that are on the roster right now. And that is plenty for me, but most of them are in the industrial or home services or manufacturing space, and then a couple outliers. But all of those are really solid businesses that aren't going anywhere. And so that's my story from the beginning to now.
That's an amazing journey, John. One of the things you touched on was you said, you answer questions in a YouTube video and you pick up business that way. And I think that's something a lot of small business owners miss. I always say, go out there and help people. And when you help people, they'll come back to you and reward you with business, right? So I think more and more people need to actually do that.
Well, absolutely. No matter what it is, I have a couple of home services clients who are very successful with adding information where it answers questions on the site. We create pieces of content and put them on their site, and they get a lot of traffic and they get a lot of business, I've noticed. And you don't always know like what questions that you're answering are going to end up bringing you business. Yeah. You could write that blog post that answers a question, and it might end up ranking really well, and you might get a lot of business from that. But it always pays to be doing that, to be creating content, whether it's a blog post or a video, or both, preferably.
Or a podcast.
But all that goes out, or a podcast like this one. All that goes out there, and people find it, and then they turn to you because you answered the question. Yeah. So, and you demonstrated that you were knowledgeable. So,
yeah, so true. Let's talk some SEO generalities before we dive deep. So what do you think about this comment? Let's just go out and get Yoast, and the green, white, yellow light switch fixes all my problems.
Yeah. So I was talking with a friend the other day, and we were discussing that. There's a lot of people in the SEO community that disparage WordPress because of that mentality. The red light, green light, yellow light, it only looks at like maybe like 3 or 4% of the problem. Okay, cool. You have your keyword in the title. That's important. But the most important thing that you need to be doing is having the right content on the page. And if you don't have that, if you don't have a link profile that looks like a large company in your space, and if you don't have good user signals, good user experience on your site, if you don't have those 3 main things on your site, your red light, yellow light, green light isn't going to do very much, and you're going to wonder why.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And then the second thing I kind of wanted to touch on was I always say to people, SEO is a long-term strategy, and it's not a set and forget it strategy, as you and I both know. Mm-hmm. And if you want a faster ROI, maybe you should be looking at ads in the meantime until you get your SEO strategy set. What are your thoughts on that one?
Well, okay. There are definitely some sectors where you must run ads in order to succeed. And the reason being is for the queries in those spaces, like the keyword searches like you're doing in Google, Google will add 4 or 5 ads at the top of the page. And if you don't buy those ads, somebody else is going to. Or if you look at anything that has to do with home services or construction or anything like that, if you're on Yelp, which is usually the number 1 or number 2 result for any of those local searches, they have 10 sponsored ads before they get to any of the organic. If you don't buy those ads, somebody else is going to. Now, if you're doing something like web design, you probably don't necessarily need to buy ads. The leads that you're going to get from Google ads or Yelp ads are probably they don't match up to what some of these other places are that are getting ads. If definitely people are on Google, it's got the biggest market share of any search engine, and the ads are there for people who aren't ranking in the map and they're not ranking on page 1 of organic. So until you get there, if you need to turn on the faucet of revenue, then yeah, you need to run ads. In some sectors, you must.
I would agree with that. Yeah. And let's jump into what I really wanted to jump into was local SEO, because in some industries like restaurants, like retail, like even web design. Local for a lot of people matters. And I think the biggest thing that businesses miss is creating what we now call a Google My Business page. And we know that those of us in the business, that terminology is shifting. But
Yeah.
wouldn't you agree that's the biggest bang for your buck right off the top?
Well, yeah, that is definitely the biggest thing. The Google Business Profile, as it's going to be called, they can create that from other information. They can aggregate it from other sources on the web, but that's probably not ideal because they're going to get your business categories wrong, and it's going to be a really weak profile. The best thing that you should do is create your Google My Business profile, put all the information in there, put your logo in there, put all your hours of operation, get the business categories right. Making sure that you're in the right category is a big factor. Another thing that you're going to want to do with that is make sure that you have a picture of the outside of your physical location if you have a physical location with your signage, and get a lot of positive reviews. That's really important, but definitely that's the foundation. But you're also going to need to appear on other places. You know, your social media profiles for sure. You got to have all your major ones. But Yelp, super important in local. I have seen people jump in Google rankings just by adding a Yelp. And this is the thing where we talk about what Google expects to see. I've had this happen with a couple different clients in the past where they didn't want to Yelp because they were afraid people were going to write a bad review, but Google expects to see a business like theirs with a Yelp. So when they added the Yelp, they got a few reviews, their rankings in Google jumped. So, yeah.
I also think, we talk about certain sectors, and before in the pre-show, we were talking about a little bit about the restaurant industry. And what most people don't get is if I'm out and about and I'm searching Chinese food in an area, the odds are I'm probably going to walk into that Chinese restaurant or call them within the first couple minutes after I do the search. And I always say to people, well, why don't you make it easy for them to call you? Because if they're on mobile and they're doing the search, they're going to call you, guaranteed almost. Or they're going to walk in and say, I want food, right? So why not make it easy?
Right.
Yeah,
you have to do that. Yeah.
And one of the easiest ways to do that is on your, especially WordPress site, is put a call now button down on the bottom. So when they find you, then they can just push a button and call you.
Well, you're going to want to do that anyway, because some of these other services, like say, for example, if you are a restaurant and you're opted into Grubhub or a DoorDash or any of these ones, you're going to get eaten up by the fees that these platforms charge. You want to have a website where people can call you directly, to where they can order directly from you. So you're circumventing some of those fees that you're getting chewed up by. Very important. And the menu in regular HTML, not a PDF. Super important. So.
Yeah, and a trick for that is you could do up that menu in something like Word if you choose to.
Right.
And there's a couple really cool Word to HTML converters that you literally take the Word document, dump it in, and it will give you the HTML code to throw right into your website. You don't even have to write it. It's just done. So, I mean, there's an easy trick for anybody trying to worried about doing that, because what people don't realize is the PDF is not searchable. So I would try to avoid doing PDFs on my website at all costs. Right, John?
Yeah, I mean, people on their phone, they can pinch and zoom, but it's really not ideal. it's just so difficult to, I mean, look, Google can't, they're not really good at seeing all the text in an image or the text in a PDF, and it's just not user friendly. You want to make it as frictionless as possible. So yeah, just, type everything out in a Word doc, put it on your site, publish that menu like that, and your Google My Business will pick some of that up as well, because they have a spot for the menu there, which you can add stuff if you're a restaurant.
Yeah.
So
what is, besides creating a Google My Business page and getting it set up properly, what is probably the next best thing a small business can do for local beyond getting on something like Yelp? Where would you go from there?
right. So depending on what type of business you are, every type of industry has like these third-party sites where you can get different listings. You want to make sure that you have all of these. If you're a home contractor, you'd want to be on Home Advisor, Porch, Thumbtack, YP, possibly Blue Book, Angie's List. These are all things that Google expects you to have a listing on. Now, you don't need to pay them for ads, even though a lot of these places will try and solicit that ad money. And you can turn on that faucet for leads, when you need to, but you want to look at the search results and see what other sites like that are appearing at the top. For web designers or people in marketing, you'll see things like UpCity, Clutch, Expertise. Those all appear really high in a lot of places. So you'd want to get listed in all those places. And some of them too, they do a screen, like Expertise, they'll screen different ones. So you can't just like appear there, just, you have to have something on your site that proves that you have that knowledge. The other thing I would say is invest in a really good site with a lot of robust content, and that is very well designed. This is a thing that Google has said that they don't have to have Google Analytics. They've just said that they don't have to have Google Analytics on the site in order to tell if people are happy with the search or not. And one thing that I've noticed is sites with really well designed, good design, they seem to rise in the ranks over time versus sites that are kind of shabbily designed. So that's another thing I would do. And for local as well, if there are any type of things that are running in your area, like, best of Toronto or, best of Sacramento, those types of lists, whether it's sponsored by a local magazine or a local award singer or a local website, anything like that is going to be good for your overall local SEO, as many of those as you can possibly get, because they just serve to prove to Google that you are the best. And a lot of people who make sites that list the top names in whatever it is, whether it's restaurants or web design or car mechanics or whatever, they're looking at these lists as well. So success kind of perpetuates future success. So anything you can do to keep that momentum going is important. And we also mentioned blogging. Some industries, I have noticed that it seems to be something that fits a pattern of what Google thinks is a high quality site in that category, where people are regularly producing content. And you can kind of check out your competitors or the competitors that are ranking high in your particular industry, and you'll be able to see if they have any of these factors or not. And that's another thing too when it comes. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry.
Oh, okay. Oh,
You
okay.
mentioned competitors, and we talk about competitors
Yeah.
and competitor research. And a lot of businesses don't bother to look at their competitors. And one thing I always say to people is find a throwaway email address, subscribe to your competitors' newsletters, like go that far.
Mm,
And then you
yep.
know exactly what your competitors are doing. And, when you're looking at SEO, look at your competitors and the research that what terms they're targeting, because you might not even be in the ballpark.
And that's very true. And you bring up an interesting thing because this will happen occasionally too. You'll talk to clients and who they think their competitors are when it comes to SEO. They might be their competitors in sales or some other thing, but it's totally not who they're competing against in SEO. Um, they might not be aware of that, but yeah, definitely doing a research of what the top ranking competitors are talking about, what they're doing, maybe what they're doing as far as other forms of marketing, whether it's social or email or whatever they're doing to get customers in the door and build their brand. Those are all clues because you will start to see patterns with top ranking sites in your category. There's definitely clues that Google picks up on and says, people who seem to be satisfied with these sites seem to have these characteristics. And it's not just things that are on the site, it's things that are outside of the site. It's things that they're doing with other forms of their marketing. It might be, part of their link profile. It might be part of the content on their site. It might even be the way that they have information organized on specific landing pages. These are all important things that you need to be looking at to improve your SEO.
Now, I would agree. I would also say one of the things Google looks at, and I think you touched on it earlier, was how do you get around a site, what the navigation is. What people don't realize is what are the two reasons people go to websites? One, how do I get a hold of you? And two, to get information and to get it quickly. And people don't want to spend like hours navigating through an endless tunnel if they can't find what they want. So I think a lot of it depends on how that website is structured, right, John?
Yeah, I mean, the structure of the website definitely important. That's, especially the larger the site gets, or the more competitive the market is, or the more competitive the industry, this really becomes quite important as far as the structure of the site. One of the things I noticed, there's a recent client that I had, and they were trying to rank for different terms. And an interesting thing that I noticed is for their main terms, most of the higher ranking sites, they seem to have supporting pages that also appeared on their site that Google must have picked up on this fact that if these sites are talking about X and they're trying to rank for X, they also have content that's Y and Z on this site as well. That's a characteristic of people being able to find what they're looking for. So those are things to take into consideration as well. But definitely your most important pages you would want to have in your main navigation. The most important pages for sure up there.
And one of the other things I see being a problem is images, and we need to go here because images are so a problem. And you and I both know you take an image on a smartphone, and the average image is what, 6 meg now, 8 meg now, give or take. And then somebody takes that image and uploads it to their website, and I just cringe every time I see that. And I say to people, are you in business to show the image, or are you actually an art site where it matters? and they look at me and say, well, it looks beautiful. And I say, well, it slows down your web page. What's your thought on images?
Yeah, definitely. So with images, you want to, you can look in Google Analytics and you can see the different browser dimensions of the devices that are coming to your site.
Yep.
You don't need a 6,000 width image. Unfortunately, though, I think what a lot of people do is they're either getting stock images, or they're taking images on their phone, or they're getting artist renditions. And they're uploading like these super big images. They're not resized to fit the browser. They're not lazy loaded. They don't have a WebP option. There's lots of things that you can do with images now to make the page load faster. Mm-hmm. Speed's definitely something that Google wants to websites to have. It's just good for your users. Nobody's going to wait for an image to load on a page. It makes your site look weird if the images are loading too slowly. It just looks weird from a user perspective, for sure.
So true. And along the topic of images, what do you think about the dreaded slider at the top of the page?
I prefer it if there's just one image at the top of the page. Yeah. Unfortunately, there's a lot of organizations where you're not going to be able to talk them out of the slider. And, it does take longer to load all the extra images and all the JavaScript that it takes to, make the slider work. If you can talk people out of it, that's great, because this has been a proven thing with numerous studies. People don't really go past the third slide, and most of them only look at the first slide anyway. Like the vast majority of people are only looking at the first slide. It's a thing where different departments in the organization want to get their stuff in, or there's different vendors or strategic partners. They want to be on the slider. There's always like other things going up behind the scenes, and most of the time it's going to be on the homepage. I mean, a lot of the time you want to make your homepage as robust as possible, but without loading it down with unnecessary stuff, because that is going to be the page with the highest authority on your site, and it will likely rank for a lot of different things, keywords that you're going for. If you can talk people out of a slider and you could just get them to do one image with one message, that's best. But I understand if you have to compromise a little bit. It's just not my first choice, for sure.
No, it's true. Nor my first choice, because I think, from an organizational standpoint, that space could be better used, not even just from an SEO, but even from an information standpoint. So I know I try to avoid sliders like the plague these days. It's so, I think 10 years ago, in my opinion, honestly. So what's your take also on things like social media profiles on sites and things like that? Do you have any take what you should put them there, you shouldn't put them there, maybe they should go on the bottom of the site to keep people on the page, things like that?
Well, I mean, definitely. I think you want to link up your different social profiles on the site. Usually I like to put them in the footer. Maybe you could put them on the contact page as well. Definitely, I think we're past the point of embedding like Facebook page feeds in the footer or sidebar, hopefully. I think most of us are. But, just for this reason, again, it always comes back to this. It's like people might follow you on Facebook and they might go off the site, maybe, but most people aren't going to scroll all the way to the footer. So if you put the social icons in the footer, I think that's fine. Most people don't scroll that far. Anyway, it's very rare. But they're there if people want to find them. But it's a characteristic of a large brand. If large brands are trying to get customers, they're trying to acquire customers in every possible place, and that's why they're active on different social media profiles. They're on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, and some of them are on TikTok, but they definitely have a LinkedIn company page and things like that. That's a sign of legitimacy. Big brands go after customers in a whole avenue of places and try and raise awareness. So your brand probably should too.
Yeah, it's so true. There's a reason why Coca-Cola runs 50 million ads around Christmas time on TV for Coke, right? I mean, that's what they're doing. They're saying, okay, you might not have seen us in the first commercial, so we'll throw you 50 other commercials and say, here you go. And they just keep, and we all know the famous Coke commercials over the years, even with the disgraced actor Bill Crosby, who used to do many ads for Coke over the years and things like that. And frankly, that's one reason why a brand like Coke is so world renowned. We all know McDonald's. Why? Because they've run 50 million ads over the years. And, it's funny.
You're right.
Everybody says, I don't want to go to McDonald's. I don't want to go to Walmart. But everybody goes to McDonald's and Walmart, right, John? So,
Yeah, predictable.
Yeah, so true. What's your other big win for companies trying to do SEO? And what would you say beyond what we've talked about?
Well, beyond the content, beyond making sure that your pages have the right layout and the right content, try and do what you can to pump up your link profile. There's a service that I subscribe to. It's called Help a Reporter Out. And during the weekday, you'll get different pitches 3 times a day from different companies that are trying to publish content, and they want people to, give them a quote. They're looking for quotes from experts. Now, most of these you might end up ignoring, but you might see one every so often where you can reply to it and you can get a link back to your site, or you can get a mention of your company. And those help build up your link profile. You can do other things in your local market to build up your local link profile, such as, you could join a chamber of commerce. I don't think that one moves the needle as much locally as it did in the past. If you went back like 5 or 6 years ago, joining a local chamber of commerce and having a link from all the different chambers in your area would help your local SEO, and I don't think it does quite as much now. But still, it's a sign that you're doing things locally. Might be better to do a sponsorship of like a little league team or a local soccer team or something like that. If you see that they have a page on their site where you're linked as a sponsor. I don't encourage people to, put your logo on the back of a t-shirt or something like that. You want to link on a website from another local site that shows that you're in the area. Those are all things these things do help. So anything you can do like that, anytime somebody makes a local pitch like that for some type of sponsorship, look for the link. That's what you want to go for. And just being newsworthy and noteworthy in your area. Again, if you could get mentioned in your local business journal, I don't know if they have that in Canada. They do down here. They have different Okay. So there are different big cities that you can get mentioned in. You can be on the book of lists or whatever if you're a big enough company. But you can do things to build up that link profile. There's lots of different ways that you can do it. There's so many different sites where people are publishing content. They're looking for input, or they're making a list of different sites in the area. So look for all of those opportunities, because the three legs of the proverbial SEO table, it's always going to be the content, the links, and the overall design and user experience.
No, so true. And it's funny you mentioned Help a Reporter Out. That's a site that I think a lot of people, they really don't use it. I've used that site for years, and the beauty of it all is if you get a quote, they'll often give you a link back to your profile, and that is where is the golden sauce. And most people don't realize it's also about building relationships, and people get around that one too, and it's like they don't understand it. So it's hard. What and it's kind of my last big question of the day is, a lot of people go and they make SEO changes, and then they say, okay, how long is this going to take effect? What's the typical timing for big SEO changes to a website these days with Google?
Well, I mean, if you have all the things, let's look at the different changes. Let's say that you've got all the content in place on your site, and you've got a pretty reasonable link profile. If you make a change as far as like changing the design of the site to improve the design, just making it look more professional, Google will recrawl that. It seems to crawl a little bit slower than it did a couple of years ago, but you can expect to see changes pretty quick. The higher authority your site is, or the more content that you put out, it seems to crawl a little bit quicker. If you make a content change to a page, it can, it might be anywhere from a few days to a few weeks. If you don't see anything after that, then there's more stuff that you need to do. Usually what I do, I'll go in Search Console, and I'll inspect that URL that's been changed, and then tell Google that I would like it to be recrawled. Yep. So that's something that you can do to speed it up, because at least for URLs that are on your site, that's one thing you can do to make it go faster. But you'll usually see the changes once it crawls it within a couple days, and all the data centers are updated. So
yeah, it's usually not that bad. What do you think about, and this is a question I always ask, because there's a lot of people who hate Google, even though we all know in the search engine world, Google's king. They're the big one.
Yeah.
And it's the privacy issue. So I know people that have gone to third-party analytics platforms to avoid using Google Search Console. What's your thoughts on that? Is that a bad move? Is that a good move, or is it indifferent?
It's indifferent. I mean, and I know people who use Fathom Analytics, or they use different solutions that aren't Google. I know that Adobe offers a solution too. There's different ones out there. Look, anything that you use on the web, if it's free, they're probably sharing your data with advertisers, whether it's social media or Google or whatever. Any site that you go to that's a big startup like that, or a big tech company, they're more than likely sharing your data. Like we said before, Google Analytics is really there for you to analyze. Google doesn't need it to make any SEO calculations. It doesn't use bounce rate, doesn't use any gameable signals like that. Time on page, all things that you can game by hiring somebody off Fiverr, or getting all your buddies to do it, or hiring people on Amazon Mechanical Turk. Those are all gameable signals, and they don't use that data. They have better ways to do it. So install Google Analytics or Fathom Analytics or any other analytics solution that you want if you'd like insight into how real users behave on your site. But it's not necessary for ranking. It's just there for you to gain insight.
Yep. And I would say if you don't know insight, that means you don't know your numbers. And if you don't know your numbers, how can you improve what you're doing? You can only improve what you're doing and optimize by actually knowing what your numbers are. So
I think there's a lot of truth to that. Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of people who I deal with, and you say, oh, what's your numbers? I don't know. How many people visited your site? I don't know. How many people visit your checkout page? I don't know. And you're like, how do you optimize without knowing? That's a problem.
Well, that's the thing with Google Analytics is you can actually look at the paths that people take to get, they take from a specific landing page that they come in on, and you can see the path that they take. Mm-hmm. And you look at that enough and you can kind of get an idea of how people are using the site or what people are looking to do on specific pages. And that's one big thing that I want to stress when it comes to SEO is it's about looking at the individual pages a lot more than people realize. There's definitely content for the top of the funnel, middle of the funnel, and bottom of the funnel, but each of those things plays a different role, and how people interact with that content and what they're trying to do, what they're trying to accomplish is totally different for each and every one of those purposes. And not every single person at the top of the funnel is going to end up being a customer, but that's okay too, because you're going to get enough people in that funnel sometimes that you're going to get some solid leads out of it. So that's just part of the game.
So true. John, thanks for the amazing conversation today. If somebody wants to get a hold of you to talk SEO or any of the above, how's the best way?
Well, my website is lockdownseo.com. You can also, ask a question on my YouTube channel. It's Lockdown SEO. And you can find me on my Twitter. The company Twitter is Lockdown SEO. And then mine is lockdown_.
Thank you very much, John. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
A very special thank you to John for joining me and talking SEO on this podcast. Thank you for listening to this edition of the SDM Show. The SDM Show is brought to you by Rob Cairns and Stunning Digital Marketing. For more information about Rob Cairns and Stunning Digital Marketing, go to stunningdigitalmarketing.info. From here, you can connect to us on social media, go to our website, and even go to the podcast to subscribe. This podcast is dedicated to my late father, Bruce Cairns. Dad, I miss you very much. Keep your feet on the ground. Keep reaching for the stars. Make your business succeed.